What's up, dudes? Welcome back to another episode of Rhomas Men's Team. Pretty simple. We are a group of guys helping each other make progress towards each other's goals. If you're new to the channel, awesome and welcome. If you want to help support the channel and join our pro team, head over to rhomasteam.com/pro, where you can contribute to us on a donation basis. We also give you access to exclusive content, mastermind groups, etc., etc. So anyway, hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll see you on the team. What is up, dudes? Mr. Ray, good morning. Guys, I'm sorry I'm late. I was running off of a little phone call meeting, and I'm ready to go now.
Wes, life is good. The heat wave's over. We're back in the 70s here in Toronto, so just the way I like it.
Yeah, man. Morning, dudes. Let's hop into it. So we are on 8 dates. If you're following along, we are on the sexy time chapter. Ray, what are your thoughts? Well, first of all, if you don't mind, let me say this. This particular chapter talking about sex, it's amazing how important it is, and it's amazing how understudied and understood it is. So when I talk to my buddies about this within their relationships, it's pretty interesting. I find that while most men are willing to share certain details, they're not willing to share other details, particularly if they're not having sex with their partners, or it's not good sex, or they haven't had it in a while. Like all of these things, very, very interesting. But this, in my opinion, falls into the category of everything is studyable and everything is practicable, except most men don't think that this particular area fits in either one of those categories. They think you either have it or you don't, you either have the attraction or you don't, and you can't study it, you can't practice it. And that, in my opinion, is BS, and can be very toxic to a relationship, because then we as men will then rely on saying, well, I should just go elsewhere outside of this relationship to satisfy this particular need. And that is obviously a slippery slope and one of the most toxic things you can do for your relationship.
100%. I thought about that too at a certain point in this reading, that comes up over and over again in our discussions, is that everything is a practice that can be mastered. There's no need to write off anything that either you have it or you don't, or that, right? It's like everything can be mastered through practice and effort. And something that jumped out at me, some of the big headlines from this chapter is success in the bedroom with sex and intimacy doesn't start as soon as you jump in bed, right? It's something that you need to nurture all day long with a connection. You have to nurture a connection with your partner all day long. And so one line that jumps out at me is, what's most important is not to let sex become the last item on a very long to-do list. The final obligation you turn to when you're both exhausted.
Yep. Yeah, there's a great book on this. It's called Mating in Captivity. We should probably consider reading it at some other point. It's called by Esther Perel. And I actually really loved what she said, because she said that basically, I think if I remember correctly, there's almost like 3 factors, at least the way that I think about it. First, there is the perception of sex that you have prior to the relationship. And that is like, how did you grow up talking about this? And it seems like a lot of American families, like in American culture, you basically don't talk about it.
Correct. And Canadian as well, I guess.
Yeah, there you go. So you don't talk about it. So then you rely on your buddies or porn or whatever the hell else to give you this definition of sex. Well, then you bring that into the next stage, which is like the attraction bubble of sex, like, kind of this hardcore, like physical attractiveness, etc. But then you go into the third stage, which is like more of the repetitive, like getting back to like baseline, and then you're left in the dark because you've got no muscle, you've got no skill. You just have your original perception based off of some skewed, right, like hyperbolized, exaggerated version of this, because you never really had a real conversation about it. And now when that initial flame goes away, you've got nothing. And for men in particular, I think this is a very, very, very dangerous place to be in.
Absolutely. Like we talked about with trust and honesty in the first chapter, and then conflict, and how to navigate healthy conflict. If you don't talk about these things with your partner, you risk an emotional distance being created between you, and it's only natural to seek out those conversations with other people.
Yeah.
Maybe your buddies, but then inevitably a female coworker or like a female colleague of yours or female acquaintance of yours.
Yep.
And then you're in some dangerous territory where, like, if she says something like, "Oh, wow, that's really tough. You and your wife only have sex once every 6 months." I'm a sex addict with a tiny vagina, and guys always say that sex with me changed their life or something, right? I don't know if there's any going back from something like that.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, please go ahead.
Well, so I was just going to say that the chapter starts with three kind of case studies of three separate couples. A married couple where one is prudish and one is not. I can definitely relate to that. I'm definitely more prudish than she grew up with an Italian father, right? And I think that's all I have to say about that. Like, there's no need to charge through an open door like he was Italian. So her mom and her dad modeled very romantic behavior all the time, to the point where it was embarrassing and annoying for my wife. Whereas my parents, I don't think I ever saw them being romantic. I mean, I remember my dad buying flowers a couple of times, but really it was a stale kind of pattern for as long as I can remember. Another couple was dating for a year, and another couple were new parents. So it's three couples that start off the chapter, and what they're all dealing with is after that initial, hormonal driving each other wild, can't live with each other, texting each other 100 times a day, kind of like teenage hysteria. How do you keep the sex going in a relationship? Because I know for me that regular sex, and it doesn't have to mean every day or even every week. I mean, it probably means every month. But there is a emotional connection that you lose with your romantic partner if you're not having sex.
Right.
So the author suggests talking about sex, not during sex, but like the next day, or or in case of the format of this book, on a date. You're in Whole Foods. You're like looking, are they kidney beans? Are they garbanzo beans? And you're like, oh, by the way, when you choked me till I was dizzy last night, I really like that, right? So that is, I mean, that's just like
personal experience.
Yeah. So laughing about sex makes it less serious and less stressful. I know that, and maybe you guys want to Google the John Gottman has a much more detailed PDF called Got Sex ? Like got milk, GOTT space SEX, and that's where you and your partner go through hundreds of questions and like really get to know each other's likes and dislikes. And I avoided doing this, because it's just the topic is just so embarrassing for me, So
you said you avoided it. Did you eventually do it, or you still have avoided
I think
it?
we did half of it. So either one of us wrote down our likes and dislikes. The other one did not. But we're it's a priority for us and it was like a year ago, right? So but it's a priority for us this week to get it done before our daughter gets back from camp.
Okay.
Just so that we can, at a time that's kind of stress-free, like not at the very end of the night or whatever, we can do this. Yeah.
And so that's where I would like to throw something out here. So I have fallen in the trap before of, how to say this? I keep my schedule very busy. And I think sometimes I can give the illusion of being like a very, very, very hard worker. But I do think that it is an illusion to a degree because most of my work focuses around adrenaline-based activities. So like I actually enjoy it. Like I feel like I'm engaged in a game. So, I guess let me change that. The illusion is the discipline. So, people say, oh my gosh, you're so disciplined. And it's like, no, I just like playing that game. So it's not like you wouldn't say somebody who's playing a video game is disciplined. They just are obsessed with playing the game. There's other activities in my life where like I'm not disciplined at all because I don't like doing it. Right? Like meditation for me is very hard because it's the opposite of an adrenaline based activity. So it doesn't feel like a game. It's like
you could confuse it with doing nothing.
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
Just sitting 100%. On a chair and with your eyes closed.
Exactly. So when it comes to physical intimacy for me, it's at times it can be difficult because, right, like obviously the actual act is more of an adrenaline based activity, but the getting to the emotional status where you like feel comfortable and like you're relaxed and like now you're like feeling like romantic, all that stuff. That is hard for me because I'm on like a constant hamster wheel. So it's like, yeah, I mean, like I don't have to go into full detail about it, but like you get the point. So Esther Perel's book was phenomenal because what she said is you actually should schedule not the activity, but the space. And I was like, oh shit. So for instance, first of all, number one, making sure all of the fundamentals of the scorecard are on point. Like, are you well slept? Are you eating properly? Right? Like, are you meditating? Are you doing all of those things to get you to baseline? And then once you're there, are you dedicating the space for romanticism? And that was a big game changer. And so that's like, oh, you don't schedule the 15 minutes. You schedule the 2 hours of like cuddle time. You schedule the 2 hours of hanging out, nothing like not checking your phone, not checking emails, not simultaneously doing something else and muddying the waters of like, no, you're hanging out with your spouse like for the space. And if the physical act happens, then the physical act happens. But if it doesn't, as long as you keep that in your calendar, and she recommended weekly, no different than a date night. It's like hang out, cuddle time.
Right. And one of the Gottman metaphors is that she is like your romantic partner is a porcupine, right? With like spiky quills. And you need to take the time to like rub the quills down. So they're not in the kind of like defensive, like spiky, painful position. Right. And so that is like, and so that is part of, that is part of the 2 hours that isn't adrenaline based or like, the sex act, right? So, and to go back to what I said before, beyond the 2 hours, sex is a lot easier if you are making bids for emotional connection throughout the day. Do you want to explain what a bid for emotional connection is?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. And Ray, you probably are more intimate with this than I am, given you've gone to a coach in this. But basically, a bid for connection is anything where you're seeking sort of like the attention of your partner. Like it could be as simple as you make a comment, oh, like, look how sunny it is today. You're looking for some sort of engagement from your partner. Admittedly, I am horrible with this. Like, especially if somebody says that, like, oh, look at the sun today. I'm like, fucking, it's Southern California. I know how the sun is every single day. I do not want to even respond to this. So that could be a big for connection. A bit for connection.
You roll your eyes, right? That's
100%. Absolutely. Like that's my default, right? So also a bit for connection could be more explicit. It could be, I try to hold your hand, or you try to hold my hand, or you try to hug, or try to kiss, or something like that. And it's not just binary. It's not whether or not the spouse or your partner responded. It's to what degree did they respond? Did they hold your hand kind of begrudgingly and roll their eyes in the process, or did they fully engage in it? And that I think it's in those micro expressions, those tiny bits for connection that can build up the intimacy over the long run.
Hey dudes, sorry for the interruption here. Just wanted to let you know, if you want to join our pro team, go to romasteam.com/pro. You can help support the channel. You will also get access to exclusive content, masterminds, one-on-one sessions, etc. All right, back to the episode.
Right. And so people who have the best sex, according to this book are people who say I love you to their partners every day and mean it. They buy one another surprise romantic gifts. They compliment their partner often. They have romantic vacations. They give one another back rubs. They kiss one another passionately for no reason at all. They show affection publicly, such as holding hands, like you said, or kissing or caressing. They cuddle one another every day. They have a romantic date once a week that may include dressing up, dinner out, massage, and lovemaking. They make sex a priority and talk to one another about sex comfortably. They are open to a variety of sexual activities, and they turn toward bids for emotional connection, not away, as you just suggested we do sometimes. I'm going to go to the very end of the chapter for a second because there was something very interesting. You know the 1-to-5 ratio, for every one bad thing you do, you have to do 5 or more to extinguish that feeling in your right? Or
Yep.
Is there a term for that?
5-to-1
ratio?
negativity ratio.
Right. In the end of this chapter, it says that for every time you roll your eyes at something your partner says or does, you need to counteract this with 20 positive responses or reactions. And that just makes me think of couples I know who kind of like snipe at each other and tease each other like in an unhealthy way, that they're building up such a deficit in that love bank account.
Yeah.
So that struck the
I
Love Lab.
completely agree.
Yeah. So the Love Lab found that successful relationships have a 20-to-1 ratio of positive to negative in all their everyday interactions in the apartment lab. And you guys remember that the Love Lab was this apartment that was kitted out with like microphones, cameras, and they would even test the stress hormones in the urine of the people to measure to scientifically measure the compatibility, attractability, love, romance, all that kind of stuff that we've always thought was kind of ethereal and non-quantitative.
Yep, exactly. Right? Now, Ray, you said something earlier, I think that maybe some guys, including myself, would get stuck on. So basically, one of the things you said, the prerequisites for having a strong physical component to the relationship was
that long list.
Exactly. And one of those things you said was tell your partner you love them and mean it. So there are some of these things on this list and just in general throughout this book where you might say, well, what if I don't mean it? And it's like, okay, that's where we can get to more of the nucleus activity, that it's your homework every single day. I would suggest minimum of realizing what you have. So let's just say it's in this, and you can use this in your work, in your business, et cetera. It's if you've been with this person for a certain amount of time, in my opinion, love is 20% feeling, 80% action. So it's like, what are the actions that you are doing to express love and also to convince yourself that you have love for this other person? And actually what I have found, because it's hard to get more robotic than me, what I have found is actually pretty easy. It's as simple as keeping a gratitude list and then comparing it to the alternative, right? Like, and particularly the alternative of loneliness. So it's like, holy shit, like this person has sat by my side, and then I literally, I've created a list in the past and need to do this in the future. Create a gratitude list that you put on your nightstand every single day, right? And read that, and so recalibrate the perception. It's like, oh shit, well, you know, when I had COVID, this person, and I couldn't freaking move, like this person was with me by my side 100% of the time. Or when this particular thing happened, whatever it is, I would be willing to guarantee you, especially like, and Ray, I'm not giving you advice, but like, especially somebody who's been married for so long, there's got to be so many things that piss you off, right? And then also so many things where Sarah's just been a complete fucking soldier by your side that compared to the alternative of loneliness, right, that you would not have. And it's like, holy shit, I'm going to imagine that my 85-year-old self would be miserable if I didn't have a partner in crime. And also would be miserable if I was just so rich, because this was almost part of my plan, part of my like subconscious plan, just to be so rich that eventually I would just, you know, I'd be one of those guys that has like a 25-year-old girlfriend. So it's like, even that, like, you have built nothing with this person, because I see plenty of people out here in Orange County that are like that stereotype, right? It's like, even with that, congratulations, you got this hot girl, but there's no continuity of narrative. There's no past that you guys have. There's no her supporting you, and I'm sure she probably wouldn't support you, like, eventually when you get, like, in some sort of, like, grave medical condition. So I think it's very easy to not create a gratitude list. I think it's also very easy to create a gratitude list. And then it's a question of, are you fucking doing it every day? So I would say the prerequisite to loving somebody is actually doing the activities and then reminding yourself of what they have done for you.
Yeah, and I love, obviously, a gratitude checklist is what every self-help guru talks about. That's one of the pillars of the self-help industry, and it's one of the pillars of, like, an examined life.
Yes.
Right, is to have gratitude. But I like how you said is realizing what you have. Right, like, so it's like, if there's a hot girl at the gym or a hot girl at the office, rather than letting that kind of, like, blinding you to everything else, it's really healthy to stop and realize what you have at home. In my case, right? Like, if you're single, before like, what's up, Fran?
Yo, what's up?
What's up, Beast? Well, I want. Sorry, Ray.
That's okay. I was just echoing what you said. So Fran was saying that, Fran, if you don't mind me bringing you on here.
Yeah, sure.
You said, not trying to sound corny, but you pretty much do the entire list that Ray just read, and we have a healthy and active sex life. Can you maybe give the guys, if you're comfortable with this, if you feel like you're excelling in this category, what are some of the secrets or some of the actions or habits that you and your partner engage in to keep it healthy?
Well, it's kind of like, you would think it'd be kind of tough because, like, we're extremely busy, like, both of us, like, both working, like, full time, and then, like, there's the shit to do at home, the 3 kids. It's always, like, busy, but you just always make time for it at the end of the day. And, like, literally, as Ray's reading the list, I'm just like, check, like, I do that, like, compliment her, like, every day, like, out of nowhere. And it's not even like she was asking for it, you just do it, it just comes out. Like, you'll be talking about some random things that you got to do, and it's just hit her with, like, a compliment or something. And then I also, there's the compliments, then there's certain things, actually, I just realized the other day, where she was like, because I sleep a lot on my couch, just because, like, at the end of the day, watch TV at night, she goes to sleep earlier, and I'll just pass out on the couch watching TV, whatever. Then she'll be like, wake up the next day, and she'll be, like, upset that I didn't come to bed. And then recently I've been coming to bed, and she's like, like, that means a lot to me. Like, I know it's, like, something that's not big, but by you coming to bed at night, like, it makes me feel better. And then, like, sure enough, we had, like, sexual interactions that for, like, that week, like 3 days or 4 days that week. And she, like, mentioned that, like, just me coming to bed, like, helped a lot for that. So, like, small things like that, like, and she actually communicated with me.
Wes, I think
so, like, what's
that
a big
would qualify
on the couch? What's up?
That would qualify as her love language, wouldn't you say, Wes?
Yeah, well, so it definitely seems to me that there's some sort of, like, physical connection there. And then also I assume there's some sort of safety component there. Sure. Like, I would imagine. So for me, the prerequisite to being able to be intimate with somebody is calming my adrenal system down. So just, like, clearing the calendar, right? So I'm not, like, playing the game hardcore like the rest of the world game. But then it seems like for your wife, if you don't mind me saying this, Fran, and probably for a lot of women, the prerequisite is, do I feel safe with you? And then I can put my guard down. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense, actually, yeah.
Now, Fran, what was your family, if you don't mind me asking, how were you raised with this topic? Was it an open conversation?
Definitely, man. Like, both my parents are, like, I'm first generation, so, like, they're both, like, old school, from Mexico. Like, you couldn't talk about anything. Like, first of all, my dad, like, didn't even talk. He just, like, went to work, came home from work after, like, working 12 hours, went to like his room and just like watched the news and ate dinner. Like that's it. Like there was no. It was almost like you were just scared to bring up any type of like sexual conversation about not anything, but like stuff like that. It was definitely like a no. I feel like my brother and I kind of like learned that growing up, like watching TV or something, you know? Like you see stuff on TV where like their parents talk to their kids about sex. It's like, yeah, that never happened in our household.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, man.
I think like when we got to high school, my mom was wanting to like you guys better be using protection. Like that's it. Or like, no, it wasn't even like that. It was like, don't be stupid. And like, you know what that meant, you know? It's like, that's pretty much it. Everything else you have to learn on your own.
Yeah. Well, Fran, I appreciate you coming on here. I'm going to let you go because the audio is a little tough, but dude, thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Oh yeah, no problem.
All right, later, pal.
Later.
So Ray, what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Fran, for joining us. Thank you for sharing your personal experience, and thank you for being a hero in the bedroom. I mean, you guys work, you got 3 kids, and you still make time for each other. Well done, dude. Like, what a beast. And I mean, yeah, my parents, so Mexican, I'm thinking probably extremely Catholic, right? Like your parents, Fran. Mine are Irish Catholic. Never talked about sex. Yeah, my dad, his job was a forensic pathologist. So for any of you who don't know, that's like when there's a murder, it ends up in the autopsy. He does the operation, like he does the autopsy, then he testifies in court about how that person was murdered. He came home from work and just like your dad, Fran, like he just kind of watched the news, cooked, and just had that kind of 1,000-yard stare, you know, and there was no discussion about anything, much less, you know, sex. And so men of that generation and in that mold, Fran, weren't into vulnerability, right? And to talk about sex with your kids takes an extraordinary amount of vulnerability. Like, I don't even talk about, like, my daughter's 9, and what I say is like, you know, if anyone ever touches you or makes you uncomfortable, let me know and I'll kill them. Like that is so like so I haven't had the sex conversation with my daughter yet, but I've tried to explain to her that to alert me when somebody is doing something that she doesn't want them to do.
Right.
But on the vulnerability issue, I'll read this passage. All of the conversations in this book, and all of them, the trust, the conflict, all the different topics that you go on the 8 dates to discuss, ask you to be honest, open, and vulnerable with your partner. And this can and will feel uncomfortable. But discussing sex can bring that vulnerability to an entirely different level. Often it can seem easier to be naked physically than to be naked emotionally. But if you want to create a relationship or marriage that goes the distance, you're gonna have to bear it all. So on the vulnerability, Wes, you bring it up all the time. And want to add on top of that, something else that you talk about too. The greatest gift a couple can give their kids is a loving relationship they can model and grow within. The children are nurtured by the love between the parents as much as by the love they receive directly. So think about the great behavior that Fran is modeling for his kids.
Right.
Right. That that a real man loves his wife, loves his family, and like says it to them 10 times a day or more. Mm-hmm. Right. Like that's the kind of modern man that I want to be for my kids.
Well, and let me ask you this, Ray. How do you already kind of discussed with us like the words that you say or do not say to your child, but how do you illustrate through your actions like that love definition? If I were to have a camera in on you guys like a love lab, and what would I see?
Yeah.
There?
So definitely saying I love you to my daughter all the time. saying it to my wife all the time, kissing my wife in front of my daughter, giving back rubs, giving foot rubs to my wife in front of my daughter, like physical expressions of love. And so there's that. We don't go away very much without Thea, but that's something that has happened occasionally. And so I guess really the way I can distinguish just off the top of my head from how my parents acted is physical displays of affection, right? It's not enough, like don't assume like your spouse knows that you love them, right? I hope you guys, I'll never have to say, of course I love you. Like,
right.
I shouldn't have to say that. It should be obvious. You have to say it. And second of all, you have to show it.
Yeah.
And so started a new job recently. I've been sending her texts. You know, I love you. I believe in you. I'm proud of you. All that stuff. And like it caught her off guard. Like she's like, it's very strange how nice you've been acting this week, Ray. You know?
Oh, really?
That's exactly the response I wanted.
Mm.
Right, because it showed me that I was making the effort the way they talked
trying.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm doing the work. I'm like doing the practice.
Exactly. Now, what do you do to trigger yourself for that? Is this you're going off of memory, or are you putting this in your calendar? How are you triggered for this? Because my fear would be that if it's off of emotion alone and it's in your psychological RAM, that 3 weeks from now it's no longer continuing. Like, what are you doing to trigger it?
Yeah, it's off of emotion alone. Like, if active, like it's like the scorecard. If active love, reaching out to my homies and checking in wasn't on the scorecard, it wouldn't get done.
Right.
So I think I need to add to the scorecard, bid for connection.
Yep. Love it.
And rather than, rather than that, I love you, like the bid for connection or bid for affection means that it can be varied, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And now I want to hit on a small point here, maybe as the last point, or if you have another one as well. Guys, please be careful here, because I have seen way too many people, including myself, fall into the category of what Ray was talking about earlier, of eventually the physicality could wear out and it could wear thin. And
it does. No, not eventually. Yeah. It biologically does. It scientifically does.
Yeah, there's a famous goat study that like actually showed this data. I'm sure there's plenty of studies that have shown it outside of the human species, like into the animal kingdom, that shows that it does. Like I could make a very strong argument for that is just biology. However, the agreement now that we're making with our spouse in marriage, arguably an evolutionary biologist might argue that that is not congruent with biology. So I think that's the first win, is understand that if it has worn thin, that is actually normal, and which I think is empowering, because if you don't think it's normal, then you're like, oh, well, something must be wrong. It's like, no,
we're not in love anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's where you fall back on. It's like, okay, number one, it is normal. This is a very predictable pattern. Then number two, you have to be extremely careful, which just goes back to a few weeks ago when Ray and I were talking, like, if you don't want to slip, you do not go where it's slippery. You have made a commitment to your spouse or your partner to be in this for the long term. So and I think men in particular are at a very risky stage here. So if you then have that frustration, and then yes, you go back and express even a microcosmic instance or anything related to this frustration to the hot girl at work, you've now just, in my opinion, you have violated a portion of your agreement with your spouse, and more importantly, with your word. Right? You are going where it's slippery. Do not do that. Instead, focus on the work, right? The stuff that this book is telling you to do, Esther Perel's book is telling you to do. That's the work. That, like, I forget, I think it was Herschel Walker who was doing like sit-ups or something someday, and some reporter was kind of like going around interviewing. Herschel Walker, I believe, was a pretty, awesome NFL player. And the reporter said, like, well, you haven't started counting yet. And he was just doing sit-ups. He's like, I don't start counting until it hurts. It's like, when it gets hard in a relationship, that's when the game starts. Not the fucking easy part for the first few months or first year or whatever. It's like, no, that's easy. That doesn't count. But if you're anything like myself, like I in the past have just jumped ship. It's like, oh, this sucks now. This is not enjoyable. So I'm going to go to the hot girl over here. And it's like, well, that can continue in perpetuity. And you're never going to get any real depth from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you don't get a medal for saying, you know, you're really hot, you turn me on, I love the way your body looks, when you've been dating for 2 months and you're in your 20s, right?
Right.
You get a fucking parade when you say that, like, you know, Fran, when you have 3 kids and you both work, you know, and that behavior wasn't modeled. You get a fucking parade for doing that.
Yep.
You know, you get a street named after you for doing that, because it is you're clearly, like, when you do that when you're in your 20s, when you're dating for 2 months, like that's your reptile brain.
Yep.
Right? Like you're
exactly.
like you're not, that is not you. There's no executive function being used.
Yeah.
To make
exactly.
to do that. But when 3 kids, when you're tired, when your dick doesn't get hard, you know, 10 times a day like it used to, that's when it's needed. That's when it counts. That's when it matters. Like, that's when you're tested, right? Like courage, like there's no courage in fucking basic training, right? Mm-hmm. There's courage on the battlefield.
Yeah. And two pieces to this. So one of the things that Ray was just saying with, like, when dick doesn't get hard, that's where, like, as a team, we need to all keep each other accountable holistically. If you watch the documentary Game Changers, like, dude, I think about how much, let's just say that particular topic, erectile dysfunction, right? Think about how many families that probably impacts, and how much it probably impacts well beyond the scope of what it should. Because if you're anything like me or from the culture that I grew up, like, probably if you have that problem, it's, as like an East Coast male, you're probably not going to be very, You're not going to be vulnerable, right? And talk to your spouse about it. You're gonna hide it, and you're gonna come up with some other bullshit, and you're probably gonna blame it on her somehow. Like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. Get away from me. You know, I had a rough day at work. Blah blah blah. You know, so it's like, holistically, are you doing all of the things? So actually, funny enough, from my understanding, that particular problem is actually more of a problem with blood flow due to clogged arteries. So that relates to your diet and exercise and sleep and all of these things. So it's like, are you doing all of those things? And that has an impact on everything else, especially a relationship. And then the second thing is, are you actually doing the things? So it's like, and raising the bar for men. So what Ray is saying and what Fran was saying is, and I say this respectfully, your fathers, I assume they stayed loyal. I have no idea if they did or didn't, but let's just say that they did. Mm-hmm. That's phenomenal. And that, yes, that is a feat, just like especially for a male to commit to another human being, another female, and not cheat on her for his entire, like, commitment to her. That's amazing. But however, I do think...
But it's baseline as well.
Exactly. It should be baseline. Now, I think as men, where we have all this stuff that we can read and learn from each other on the internet, all this kind of cool shit, we need to step it up, right? It's not, in my opinion, no longer acceptable just to go home every day and, like you said, Ray, have 1,000-yard stare when it comes to sitting at dinner with your family just so you can go and sit and watch the news. That to me, number one, I don't want to sign up for that. Number two, it's like, what are you teaching the people around you? And are you actually contributing to the team? And I think it's no longer acceptable.
Like, how loved do the people around you think? Like, how validated are they?
Yeah. How actively engaged are you with all of your relationships versus just being a passive, like almost non-participant in the fact?
Right. Now, Wes, we are coming up on the hour.
Yep.
And it's easy to stray into the it's easy for us to stray into the topic of, like, what good fathers and bad fathers look like, of course. And that's a pillar of our program here. But the 8 dates model means we have to have these conversations with our romantic partner.
Yes.
So it's my commitment to you that by Friday, I will have had the sex date, the discussion about sex with my partner. For me, because of my programming, this is going to be the hardest one so far. way harder than trust and commitment, and way harder than chapter 2, which was conflict management.
Hell yeah.
So I'm committing to you to have that conversation with life, and you have that conversation with your goldfish or whoever is your whoever ranks highest in your currently as your most intimate partner.
Yep.
Okay.
I will do that as well. And then also, just so you guys know, there is a PDF that you can print out that's referenced somewhere. And I don't know, like look up. Ray, do you have this PDF?
It's on the Discord. Yeah, it's on the Discord.
Okay,
and what I've also done is I meant to do this earlier, but earlier today I sent the speed dating one-page chapter summary of which I will read to you right now, and then we'll get off the air.
Cool.
Romantic, intimate rituals for connection keep a relationship happy and passionate. Couples who can talk openly about sex have more sex, and the women have more orgasms. Talking about sex is difficult for the majority of couples, but it gets easier and more comfortable over time the more you do it. The best time to talk about sex is not when you're making love, but outside the bedroom. Tell your partner what you like and what feels good, not what they're doing wrong. 80% of married couples have sex a few times a month or more. Whatever frequency is comfortable for you is normal. Married couples have more sex than couples who are dating or living together. Top sex and passion killers in a relationship are lack of physical affection, flirting, intimate connection apart from sex. Vital to do things left undone. Emotional distance and intense conflict. Lack of safety, as you brought up, either emotional or physical. Exhaustion and stress, and feeling unappreciated. So these are all things we go through, right? Feeling unappreciated, exhaustion and stress, all these things. But don't let sex be so far down on the to-do list that it gets compromised as a result.
Yep.
Wes, great discussion today. Fran, thank you for your contribution. Gentlemen, thank you for chiming in. We'll see you on Friday.
Hell yeah. And Dima, awesome that you showed up again, buddy. Keep it up.
Yes,
Talk to
sir.
you guys soon. Later, dudes.